mix of sand and clay for the floor.
Is it wet or?
No, it's barely wet. It's slightly moist. If you went to make a ball of it in your hand, it probably wouldn't hold together, but it's not bone dry. The picture in the middle is one of the solutions that somebody came up with how do you tamp down the dirt that comes close to the wall, because that little tamper, as you can imagine, you just can't get enough force close enough to the wall. So we took wedges of wood and just put the wood down there. We can hold that close to the wall and hold it under the trim. And because the trim was already set up for the wall, but we had it nailed into the wall to a level so you could put the dirt and come up to the trim rather than put the trim in later. The trim was actually the screed that we used to measure where we were done. And so they shot where the trim piece was. It's kind of backwards from regular construction. You put the trim piece in and you built the dirt up to it. And so to get the soil compacted underneath the trim as you're going toward the level that you want it to be, you put the piece of wood in there, and then you take a mallet that happens to be a mallet with a rubber head on the end of it, and it helps absorb the shock somewhat, but it still makes it so it compacts all the way to the edge of the wall. The upper right, you've got a better picture of what that screen action is, where we're taking the rocks and the larger dirt clumps out of the clay, and the bottom pictures are pretty much showing the process as it goes. Now the middle lower and the right lower, we're going to start putting on the second to last finish level where he's got the garden hose in there, and that's when you do start spraying the dirt after it's in place and you're tamping it down even more. And so you want to do this on a particularly dry day, but nonetheless, once you finish this floor, you need to pretty much leave a week at least to get most of the moisture to evaporate out of it. And the kind of high humidity days like we've got now would take even longer, but this was March, it was slightly cooler and slightly drier, and it was working itself out. That piece of wood in the lower right is also a screed that had a couple of little tabs that went along top of the trim. And so the bottom of that wood was giving us an idea of what level was. And so we were able to level the floor out just using a relatively straight piece of wood. That's just a simple 2x4 that was relatively straight. So we know where to add, where to subtract, and where to work it on.
How critical is the soil mixture between the sand and the clay and loam or whatever?
The question was how critical is the mix? It's not too particularly critical. There's a lot of give and take on that, but you want to make it as uniform as possible. So when you have it uniform, then it's easier to control. I don't recall the exact or what the preferred mix of clay, sand, and loam. Probably isn't much loam in there because that's more organic. But the clay and sand mix in there is something that I don't recall right off the hat, so I apologize for not knowing that. But it's a lot of pounding, sifting. It really is. And this is the very last thing that you do before you really put the sealer on it. You've got more of a slurry sort of mix, and you're putting it on with a trowel, and you put it on with a sponge, you put it on with a trowel, but you're also pushing it into it to make it a real fine, very even, very uniform looking floor. And the picture on the right just kind of gives you an idea. It's about half of the crew. It was probably 5 o'clock in the afternoon by this time, and everybody was just beat up hard, So if you're thinking about putting in an earthen floor, memorize that picture because it's it really was rough. Okay, that was the earthen floor workshop that I went to in Austin. It's not too particularly thick. Once you put the rocks down, and the rocks are probably 2 or 3 inches of the rocks, once you get above that, it's probably 4 or 5 inches at the most of all that. This one was more like 3.5. It was on the lower end of being thick, but it was just more of a demonstration. And like I said, we really finished up half of the floor. There were still many hours left to go ahead and do that to the other half. So, yeah, we had the rocks in the first level or two of the tent earth, and then, you know, we just finished up that one little section near the front. So it's really rough. What made it even rougher too is that you go from where we were mixing the soil into the house in a wheelbarrow on ramps of wood ramps, and then we had this other wood that got it down into the garage. It was a step down, so just the up and down and getting all that weight back and forth was a mess. Okay, this was a very exciting workshop. This was the first time I've been to this particular event. It happens every 2 years, and it always happens at the same place, in El Rito, New Mexico. Isn't that right, John?
Yeah.
John's been there a number of times, and he and I had the pleasure of driving up to New Mexico with Mr. Maroney, and it was very enlightening and very, I mean, John really made the time go by pretty good. We agreed on a lot of stuff, and boy, we disagreed on a whole lot of stuff, and it was a lot of fun. But this is probably, if you're interested at all in earth construction, and you want to get a really good introduction to the kind of thinking that's out there as far as natural building in this kind of construction goes, you've got to go to this in 2011. There'll be other opportunities of other things to do between now and then, but don't miss this in 2 years. It's really, really probably one of the three best things I've ever been to as far as information and all. With Earth and Construction, it is an Adobe workshop, Adobe Association of the Southwest, but as you can imagine, it does also include compressed earth block, which is more common here because of Lawrence Jarrett's machine, and also rammed earth. And rammed earth is another ancient technique of taking dirt and you're pounding it in between formwork. And so you've got the formwork up, and there's a picture of that coming up here. But those kind of technologies are talked about here at this conference. Just to let you know, the location is Northern New Mexico College, and every structure on the campus is an Adobe structure. It's phenomenal. You know, you go around San Antonio and say, where's all the Adobe structures? Where's the, you know, there's maybe one or two. Yes?
They were built early 1900s, too.
Yes.
The turn of the century.
Yeah, especially that picture in the lower right, I think that was one of the first buildings. But this was very, very long ago, a 100-year-old building there, Adobe block. That was used for a school and is still being used today. The big picture here on the left, does not go quite back that far. I don't know when that particular structure was built, but it has the cafeteria in it, and the library is the room closest to us, and then there's a huge auditorium. And that picture in the upper right shows the interior of the auditorium, just to give you an idea of the big structural beam that goes across there holding up the roof, the massiveness of the walls. You can build just about anything you want out of Adobe block. It's not just for little 10 by 10 shacks. So this, of course, was probably the most natural place to have this kind of conference. All right. The workshops were plenty, and there was a lot of displays and exhibits. The upper right, on the upper left, there was a big flatbed truck that was up there from the Adobe factory. You see in the upper right, they've got a wonderful little GMC pickup truck. The colors really don't do it justice on that that truck. That's really a lime green truck with the real deep forest green fenders. Really cute. I think more people took a picture of that little truck than anything else at the conference. But they're selling these Adobe block, and it's really hard to imagine in San Antonio when, you know, if you're interested in Adobe, you go, gee, when am I going to get the block? Oh my God, it's, well, I guess, well, these people have this huge business, and they just spend all the building time, their particular season,